Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephanie Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. This is episode 54 of Changing the Face of Yoga, and my interviewee is Caroline Giles. And we will be discussing corporate yoga and her experiences with meditation. Let's listen. Hello, this is Stephanie Cunningham with Changing the Face of Yoga. And my guest today is Caroline Giles. And she does a lot of different things, but we're going to talk specifically about corporate yoga today and meditation. Now, Caroline is a certified yoga therapist, a senior yoga teacher, a meditator, and owner of Experience Yoga. She's been practicing Hatha Yoga for 25 years and teaching for more than 12. She's offering classes in her own studio, Experience Yoga, and she's doing corporate yoga also, which I think is really interesting, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I love this quote: yoga is a journey, and at Experience Yoga, the focus is not about touching your toes, but what you learn on the way down. It's never too late to start yoga, and I certainly agree with that. So that's wonderful. Welcome, Caroline. And is there anything else you'd like to add to that introduction?
No, thank you, Stephanie. No, I think that's a broad outline of what I do and what I offer, as well as I do individual work with people as a yoga therapist here at my studio.
I haven't had any published podcast on corporate yoga, and I wanted to ask Caroline about that because it seems to be a well-hidden secret that there's really quite a bit of it going on, but nobody is really aware of it unless you happen to be in a company that's giving it. How did you get started in corporate yoga?
Yeah, the way I was fortunate to start was that I knew someone that was offering wellbeing programs in the workplace. This was some 10 or 12 years ago, and they were offering talks and, lunchtime events that might have been about healthy food. They also wanted to offer yoga and meditation. And she contacted me to see if I was available to teach lunchtime or after work class, and also to teach a meditation course. And that's how it started. At that time, so this is several years ago, there were many companies setting up to offer wellbeing programs in the workplace. So they would set up the structure and then bring people in to deliver certain parts of the program, and yoga was a very common part of the program, maybe for 10 weeks, maybe for a shorter period of time, maybe a one-off. And I was fortunate from there that one of the clients wished me to continue, and I continued teaching there weekly for about 4 years. So that was a workplace, as people would know, some workplaces are very committed to their staff in terms of aiming to provide the work-life balance. Some places go that extra mile in terms of doing that and fund the programs in the workplace, although the last couple of years that's become less common, unfortunately.
Really?
So yes, yeah, well, certainly in my experience in Melbourne where I live, and this has happened for me with a couple of corporates last year that I've been with long term, like 4 to 5 years every week, which has been amazing and great to see the change in the people. And interestingly, it does flow over into the workplace. Like if you send some people back into their working day a little more calm, a little more focused, perhaps a bit less pain, it naturally is going to have an effect on the people that they are working with. And yeah, a couple of them have actually stopped funding the program. Some of them were part funded with the staff co-contribution, which I actually really encourage because they can offer at a much lower cost to the organisation for people to get a discount at their local gym. And now gyms offer a whole range of classes, and often that includes yoga. So that's been a bit of a shift in my observation, and a couple of other people I've been talking to in the industry here about how organisations are justifying doing that in the workplace. Yeah,
I see.
Which is a shame, but,
Yeah, but if you did it for 4 or 5 years, then employees of these companies must have been interested in having these courses.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like anything, often it's the minority, but some of those, and they required a minimum number in the workplace. So we're talking about 10 to 15 staff that would come, but they were really committed and felt the benefit would often bring other staff along. So they were really not happy when the program stopped. But I guess they knew that unlike many other workplaces that don't have anything, that they had some fantastic opportunities, and I would think that most of them have found a class somewhere to go to. It may not have been the gym, may be perhaps a yoga studio, so that it's actually been something, because to me it's not necessarily about just the class in the workplace, but it might be about how people start to think differently about their life and about their well-being.
You had a quote on your website that you were referencing some new research that said wellness is an extremely powerful ingredient in employee engagement, talent retention, creativity, and innovation. So the benefits to a company or an organization would be that really the yoga classes supporting wellness, obviously, are really helping to, well, really it's the bottom line. It takes a lot of money to retrain to train someone new and to keep your really good employees. Was there ever any discussion about that with the companies? I understand that they changed their mind and that's fine, but did they kind of understand that what yoga was contributing to their bottom line, if you would?
Yes, that quote came from the World Economic Forum that happened globally, and I found the results of that really quite fascinating. And it's often what we believe, but now there's a lot more research to support what we perhaps intuitively know. I guess the issue in the workplace is often the people that I'm liaising with are the HR department, and it's not necessarily the HR manager. I do my best to aim to have meetings with the more senior people, but it's very, very difficult to get a foot in the door really to the decision makers. And if you're in an organisation where you have someone at quite a senior level who either does some of these practices, or I worked in a large global company where the second in charge to IC was actually a regular meditator. And so working with someone like him, that was a given. He didn't need to even have the research or know that. He just believed it from his own practice, and he absolutely wanted it for his staff. So I think it's probably most helpful if you are within an organisation like that, trying to create that change, working from the inside out. It's a little more tricky when I'm working from the outside in. My previous life, I did work in the corporate environment, so I sort of understand the workings of the place. But when you're not within the place, you really need a champion there to really start to, bring some of these things home. Okay. So there are places that still support these kind of initiatives, but I don't think it's as widespread as it perhaps used to be.
You would suggest to someone that wanted to start a program like this to find themselves a champion to help them within the organization. Yeah. Okay, yes. Great tip.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And someone who's committed to try and bring about getting together a group of staff, creating the space and finding the space in the day in the organisation. If you've got someone within the organisation that's really committed to that, it helps to bring it about. And the other thing I do recommend when I work with places is that there's a co-contribution by staff, so that the organisation might fund 50% of the cost, for me to come and teach, and staff pay the other 50%. So it might be something quite, it may not be a lot, so it might be $5 or $7 that the staff member has to pay each week. But what it does is reinforce their commitment to come. It offers them something that they wouldn't get at that cost outside of the organisation. So it does bring some value to it for the employee and the employer.
Let's talk a little bit about what kind of classes you deliver and how you deliver them. There were some pictures of people in suits doing Warrior 2, and I thought, well, gee, that's interesting. So basically, they may be dressed as, corporate employees or you said you did chair yoga, and I could see doing chair yoga because you could do it at your desk, but I just kind of wondered what kinds of courses or classes you offer.
No, the photos of men in suits was really to get people's attention, particularly men's attention. And people usually come, they don't come in their suits, they get changed. When I teach a class in the workplace, usually you're lucky to get an hour, and I think if I can get an hour, that's fantastic. I do aim to teach things that they can replicate themselves at their desk, at home, or a lot of them travel, as in flying. So most organisations provide mats. So I've had organisations that buy a certain number of mats for staff so that the mats are there. So we do work on the floor. We do work in standing, often against the wall, and we do work in chairs. So I tend to mix it up because everyone's got different injuries and preferences. But my intention is that I teach them things. They don't just follow me doing stuff. I actually teach them what part of their body we're trying to energize or release or open, and what practices might suit them in a particular place, like sitting on the plane, in the lounge room at home at night, in the hotel room. So try and make it really practical, because I find that's much more accessible for people at work. Whereas when I teach in my studio, it has a much more meditative and spiritual focus, because that's very much what I teach at my studio.
Okay. Do you also introduce them to meditation and pranayama and all of that?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, that's always a component. So that's the basis from which I teach. So it absolutely is. And in some organisations, I have taught meditation courses. So that's very much obviously what it's about. But yes, in any class I teach, however short or long, there is always an awareness or a mindfulness component at the beginning, and a breathing practice, a brief meditation at the end.
You had a little video on your Facebook, and I looked at it, and you said something very interesting, I thought. You had apparently done the post, and I couldn't find the post, so we'll just have to go with this. But it said that meditation changed who you are and the life that you live. I think that's a really profound thing to say about almost anything, but especially meditation. So could you kind of explain that a bit more to us? Because that's really important, that it could do that kind of change.
Yes. So this came about 16 years ago, when I had an unexpected health issue in my body, and I had heard that meditation was really helpful for your health and for your immunity. And it was something I'd dabbled a bit with. I'd certainly been practicing yoga then. I hadn't done my teacher training at that point. So it must have been actually about 20 years ago. And I was working at one of our universities with, I'm not sure if I can mention names, but with someone called Craig Hassad, who has written books now on mindfulness. And so I was working with him in research, and I said to him, look, I believe that, meditation is really helpful. I know you give lectures on it, etc. Can I have the notes? Can I read about it? And some of the best advice I received about meditation is, he said, just start every day, 5 minutes every day, come back to me and tell me about how it was. And I like to have the knowledge and the research and understand it rather than just do it, so to speak. I like to know, like we all do. And I started because at that point in my life, I was really fit and healthy, and I had to have quite significant surgery for cancer. And I just thought, I'll do anything to make my body healthy, and I was pretty healthy. So I started and I think that's then why it led me to take on a teacher training whose foundation is very much that meditation is really the most important part of the practice. People think the physical poses are the most important, but the physical poses, even the breathing practices, are to allow us to steady the body and the mind. And so I continued. I was fortunate to be working with Craig, and he ran some courses at the university. I then did my teacher training, and part of that commitment as a teacher is that we have a practice every day, which I have to this day. And in those early days after surgery, I was having blood tests. Oh, I can't remember. Felt like every day, probably every 2 weeks. My white blood cell count was basically not on the register. It was less than nothing. And over about 2 years, my immunity strengthened, meaning my white blood cell count and things like my neutrophils that reflect my immunity started to come back into the normal range. I didn't expect that. I just knew that I felt better from meditating, in the sense that I felt better able to manage what might come up in the day, better able to manage medical appointments and unexpected changes. And I guess it took my path down the road of yoga, becoming a teacher. And at that point, if anyone had said to me, 12, 15 years later, I would have my own studio space, I would be doing this full time, I would be working with people one-on-one about the things that I'd learned as a yoga therapist, I wouldn't have believed them. So I guess, I know you hear people say this, but it's really true. As I said, I worked in the corporate world. I was very driven, very focused, very interested in climbing, the corporate ladder. And very quickly that became less meaningful because as we know, it's not a long-lasting source of happiness, where your happiness is defined by things that happen outside of yourself. So it allowed me to find to settle myself within myself, I guess, basically. And my life is quite different to what it was when I turned 40, which is when I had the surgery, and in a couple of years I'll turn 60. So it absolutely has, and to this day I still meditate every day. And I've just actually been reading some of the research. I'm doing a presentation next week, and the research now is significant about what changes in your brain. And I know I'm way calmer. My problem solving is so much more effective. I sleep better. Meditation is one of those things, and Craig was really wise to say, you just need to try it. You actually just need to do it. It's not one of those things that you can touch and hold. And I know for a lot of people that's the real challenge around it. So what am I doing and why and how much? And it's one of those things that you just need to sit with, literally, and keep chipping away at.
Yeah, it is very experiential. I mean, it's really wonderful to have all of this research to back up and actually say, okay, this is what happens, but it really doesn't matter, does it? It's just what it does for you inside your own body, inside your own mind. Yeah, I agree with you. I think I could say exactly the same thing, that I don't think people would even recognize me now. I didn't work in corporate, but I worked at high level state policy, and to see me now and that I'm doing podcasts and yoga and all this, I think they'd all be quite shocked. That yoga gets to you. It really does.
Yeah. And I think but that's the way it, like with what you're doing, that's how it can assist other people, by talking about it, by making it available out there, not necessarily by going to a class, but hearing about it, listening to people's experiences. And, you never quite know on what day or what time something you say might just gel for someone. They go, oh, yeah, okay, maybe that's something I could try or do. Yeah.
I've had comments from people who say that it is really, the podcast with all these different teachers and therapists talking is really an excellent way for connection, that yoga teachers that may be in a small town or rural area that really don't see a lot of other yoga teachers can kind of connect in and hear what other people are doing within their yoga classes or individually for themselves. And so I think I didn't start it for that, but I think that's really an excellent outcome that I totally and completely did not anticipate, I admit. Anyway, now that I'm off topic.
That's okay. That's not what it's about. But I was going to say too that someone else said to me along the way with meditation, like my courses, I went to the ashram in the States. I was taught by swamis, and they said, a really obvious thing, unless you do it, unless, you sit and do the meditation, it can't work if you don't do it. So you just have to trust the process, that you can't change something unless you're actually prepared to change something and do something different. Yeah, so that always sticks with me. Some mornings I get up and think, why am I doing this at 5 a.m. or whenever?
Why am I doing anything at 5 a.m? No. You said, I thought it was a very interesting thing you said on your video, which was just do it 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes at night. And, everybody has 5 minutes. So it was a very doable thing. And I think that's important for people to realize, that when you start, that 5 minutes is enough. And that's a good thing to do. Now, most likely, at least in my experience, you'll want to do it longer after a while. But that 5 minutes, I think, makes it accessible. And that's really important.
Yes. And that was also Craig. Because as you probably know, he's a GP. He's trained in medicine. He's a doctor. And so he says, my prescription, so rather than writing a prescription for tablets, his prescription is 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes at night. And that's what he said. It was interesting because I thought, he would know that I'd probably sit for longer, but he was very wise in the sense that start small and something that you can continue, rather than one long session a week. And this is what, I now say to students, just start somewhere. Something is better than nothing. But yes, when people say, I don't have time, we talk about, okay, where can you find 5 minutes in your day? Some people have children or busy mornings, maybe it's at lunchtime. Maybe it's stopping the car on the way home before they get home from work. There's time we can find, but when you have a motivator as to why you want to do it, then that does become self-perpetuating.
Yes, sounds like you're quite a motivator.
And I guess that's what I had.
So, both health-wise, but also an excellent mentor. Because I've heard Craig at a conference, and I was very impressed with what's the word? Maybe his humanity. He just was a very warm, loving person, I thought, and you thought, I could. Do what he tells me to do. That's okay. I'm not that kind of person in general, but I really admired him.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with anything, but I was, like I said, I was reading your Facebook, and you said your studio has, or is in the middle of, a Japanese garden. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I love Japanese gardens. I think they're just gorgeous. But I was very surprised at that juxtaposition of yoga and a Japanese garden.
Okay, yeah. So the courtyard outside the studio is is a Japanese style. I love a lot of the traditional teachings, not just the ancient yogic teachings. So I think any calm, I guess the reason why we created it in that way, I would have loved sand, but my husband said the dog will dig it up. So we actually chose paving. We don't have a dog anymore now, but I don't think I'll get to change it. But yes, I guess it was more around the serenity, around the stillness, a little bit of order in terms of the space. And so often when people come here, and I have had swamis come to stay here, they walk in, they go, wow, you just walk in the front gate, and my studio and the courtyard is at the front. It's a separate entrance. Just energetically, people already, and I've got water features, already people sense that their blood pressure has dropped, and it probably has.
So
it was intentional.
I was in Japan, and we went to a traditional Japanese house. And what I loved about it was it seemed very stark and very ordered, but there were all of these very minute little touches, like a carved rose. And I thought, I loved the subtlety of it. It was amazing. And that's, I think, what I like about the gardens too. So I don't get to Melbourne too often, but I may visit. But I do want you to have an opportunity to tell people about anything that we haven't covered that you would like others to know.
Thank you. I guess the main area that I'm working on at the moment is my work as a yoga therapist, and yoga therapy in Australia is starting to get a little bit more known and understood. And the difference with yoga therapy to yoga is that we work individually with people. They may or may not have chronic health conditions. And I'm really passionate about it because it's about how all this wisdom and knowledge of yoga and Ayurveda can actually assist a person in their life. It might not change their health condition. It may not change a prognosis. However, it allows them to live their life a little bit more fully. It allows them to have some control over what they do in their day that is perhaps a healthier option for them. And I really hope that it'll probably take the next 10 to 20 years, it's more in our health system. We're part of allied health teams to provide this in hospitals. I've worked with students in their final year of exams, so in schools, to really make it a bit more known and available and accessible, because a group situation is not right for everyone.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. I've really enjoyed this. If you all would like to contact Carolyn, her email is Caroline, CAROLINE, at experienceyoga, all one word, .com.au. And her website is www.experienceyoga.com.au. And her Facebook is also Experience Yoga, as well as her Instagram. I really want to thank you for the interview. You gave some really great tips about people who may want to get into the corporate yoga world, and also about meditation. Meditation is often overlooked in many forums, shall we say, fora, and to have someone say how much it's made a difference in their life, I think is an important thing for people to understand. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for the work you're doing, getting the knowledge of all these things out into the world. It's fantastic.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful interview. If you would like to be a guest on Changing the Face of Yoga, please go to my website, www.yogalightness.com.au, and under the Changing the Face of Yoga tab, you can complete Be Our Guest form. After reviewing the form and finding it applicable to this podcast, we will send you a link to schedule an interview. Please download, review, and tell your friends of any podcasts that are of interest to you and to them. If you would like to contact me, send an email to info@yogalightness.com.au. And thank you for listening to Changing the Face of Yoga.